So, hello everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Since I don't speak any Lithuanian, I just hope I won't repeat myself that much after what the guys already said, and I also hope that they didn't say anything funny about us, because, you know, to us it's completely difficult language. So, as already said, my name is Peter Stancik. I'm a Security Evangelist at ESET, and today, together with my colleague Ondrej Kubovic, we'll present you the latest and the most interesting cases from research that was done by ESET research labs. And I will start with a little bit of introduction. ESET, as most of you, I'm sure, know, is an IT security company with more than 25 years of history in the field. We are focusing mainly on the antivirus technology, but it's not the only area of our expertise. We are, what you might not know though, is that we are a privately owned Slovak company. We are headquartered in Bratislava in Slovakia, where also we are based together with Ondrej. And we have many regional centers and offices around the world. And we benefit also from a large network of our valuable partners, such as these guys over here. Except for that, we have quite a number of malware research and technology centers, and it's actually thanks to their work that we are here today, that I'm able, together with Ondrej, to present the results of their collaboration and results of their work. So, together, we will cover various topics. We will split the presentations into two parts. First, Ondrej will tell you some information about an interesting case where a botnet was used to manipulate a visa application process, which is kind of unique and strange, and we never seen such activity before. Then he will cover a story about a malware that was used to cheat in online poker games. And he will conclude with ransomware that is attacking Android mobile platform. Then I will take over with a rather targeted operation named Bootstrap. Then we'll follow with an interesting case of espionage that was targeting high-profile institutions in Slovakia, Ukraine, and in Poland. And we will conclude with a case of router worm attacking embedded systems, Linux systems, and this malware sample was after social networks, so mainly about the clickjacking frauds and stuff like that. After this, there will be some time for a few questions. So during this Q&A session, you might ask whatever you are interested about ESET, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. But I took the liberty of answering or pre-answering some of the questions that arise quite often when we have conferences like this. And the first of them is quite controversial and reads like, do antivirus companies create malware themselves? As you wouldn't believe how often we get asked this question. And the answer is very simple, no we don't. Well, the main reason is because we are the good guys. We are trying to combat and to keep up with the black hats, to create as many technology advances as possible to mitigate the impact that they are trying to make with their threats. But some of you might object that, okay, but through creating new malware, you would create business for yourself. Well, that's true, and that's a valid objection. But the thing is that there is no need for any antivirus company to create any more malware. Because, for example, only our telemetry shows that every single day we detect, our system detects roughly 300,000 new unique samples that we haven't seen before. So every day our system, our cloud system named LiveGrid, detects that many malware samples that we haven't seen before. So there would be no point, and actually we had plenty of work just to deal with these samples that are out there and that are produced by the malware writers. So yes.
The same virus and two different hashes of those two files.
Yes, would count as two different.
As two different.
Yes, of course, and that's a fair note that in this number, even a single tiny change in a byte would add to this number. But the thing is that current trends are using various encryption malware that is just modifying the same threat in a very different way, trying to evade the detection. So that's why it's fair to count it in, because sometimes you need different techniques to handle the detection itself. So, as I said, no need for any antivirus company to create another malware when we have plenty out there to deal with. Another question, and this is actually another question, this is a claim that been discussed over the recent months in the media as well, is that antivirus is dead. Many sources claim that antivirus as such, traditional one, are not able to compete and to combat with that amount of malware. And they explain it that only one signature covers one malware sample. So if there is so many malicious samples out there, it is almost impossible to create that many signatures that would cover every single threat out there. To that, I only think that I need to say that we've been in this business for more than 2.5 decades, let's say 25 years, when the first NOD antivirus was out. And since then, even though we are still using as the core of our technology a module that is handling the signatures, these are not the traditional ones where one signature is capable of mitigating or blocking one threat. We have deployed our own very sophisticated so-called DNA signatures, where one such signature can cover up to 10,000 of different new malware samples that we haven't seen before. And it's not about the signatures as well. So our approach is so-called layered approach. So we are trying to combat the threat that is reaching the system at various levels. For example, we have vulnerability shield that is trying to block the known network vulnerabilities that are in network protocols. We implement reputation systems that can compare already tackled samples and decide whether there is further need to analyze them or not. This improves the efficiency of the whole system quite significantly. Then there is exploit blocker that has a great potential to block and catch so-called 0 days. So this is not focusing only at the malicious code itself, but it's looking at the applications that are commonly misused. So, for example, PDF readers or various internet browsers and stuff like that. We also have implemented a very sophisticated way how we trigger memory scan. So, even if a threat gets executed or decloaks in the memory, we can examine that and take some further actions. And of course, today, that wouldn't be a technology without a cloud in it, right? So we also have a cloud solution that benefits from many systems out there that can share information and share the information about the threats more efficiently and more in a speedy manner. And what the last module stands for, this one is capable of blocking botnet communication. So basically, should a computer or a system become a part of a botnet, we can detect based on communication patterns that this is happening, and we can block that immediately. So, as I said, no, antivirus is not that. In fact, it's needed more than ever. But it's fair to say that antivirus as such is not enough. You need to deploy many other levels, such as backup, intrusion detection systems, and stuff like that. But it's thanks to these modules that we were able to detect the malware samples and analyze them that we are going to present. So without further ado, I'm giving the word to Ondrej, and he can walk you through the few steps.
1, 2, 1, 2. I will try. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, my name is Ondrej Kubovic. I'm a security specialist with ESET. I'm going to show you a few examples of what our researchers in all those centers you saw around the world have encountered in the wild. So, the first one is Visa botnet. Our telemetry detects it as an agent.pyo. What is interesting about the malware or this kind of attack was that it was targeting the visa application process that was going on in Belarus. If you're a Belarusian and want to travel to Poland, you need to have the visa. For that, you need to get to the Polish consulate, and the Polish consulate has only a few time slots for those meetings with the applicants. This is of the really short supply. Just to illustrate it, if you wanted to travel to Poland in January this year, you only had like 2 days in December 2014 where those meetings were taking place. So they were of really short supply, and the Belarusians were really attracted to these options. This was also known to the attackers. They saw an opportunity in this, and what they did, they wrote a script that was using or taking advantage of the way that you applied for those meetings. That was the website of the Polish consulate, which was having this form on the website, and you needed to fill it out. You can imagine a script or a computer can do this much quicker than a human, so the human applicants had almost no chance to get those meetings, and the computer was always the first. And then the attackers were trying to sell those meetings to the applicants, to the real applicants. When the Polish consulate found out, they were trying to impose some limits, some deterrences, so this won't happen anymore. They used some of the fairly known systems, such as CAPTCHA. Does everybody know CAPTCHA? The annoying text you need to write down to prove that you are a human. But this can be also broken. So they were trying to limit the IPs that could connect to the website only to the Polish websites, Polish IP addresses and Belarusian IP addresses. That way, no other computers could be connected from different other countries. And they were also trying to limit the proxies and VPNs, so you couldn't use any like proxies from different kinds of world. If the attacker was from Asia and was trying to use only a proxy in Belarus, didn't work also. What the attackers, when they saw this, they figured out we need to update our technique, and they came out with the agent.pyo, which was a botnet. Simply, what it was a huge number of infected computers that were acting like zombies, were remotely controlled by the attacker. They set up a command and control server, and from there they infected a large number of Belarusian computers. They chosen the Belarusian IPs to use it for the attack. Then all of those computers were connecting to the website, masquerading as legitimate users, as humans, and as you can imagine, again, they were quicker than the humans, so they got the appointments, sent them to the attacker, and the logical next step, he sold it to the real applicants. How did they do this? How they infected the computers? In the end, it was on the time limit that we were following this attack. It was up to 900 computers that were infected, which is fairly much if you take into account how many applicants are there and how many appointments are there. 900 pieces, it's really a lot. And to infect the computers, they use the nuclear exploit kit, which is taking advantage of many, let's say, flaws in the systems. You can see there we have like Windows 7, Windows XP, or different applications like Internet Explorer. Also, Firefox is here. So there are many ways how to get into your computer if it's not updated. So this is what they used. The second malware I'm going to show you that our researchers have come across is the poker cheater. Yes?
Can I ask about previous slide?
Mm-hmm.
Could you please evaluate the amount of money that the bad guys earned during that operation? Was it worth it, or was it like $1,000 and that's it?
We think it was worth it. As you can see that only a few applications are, there is a large amount of the applicants that want to get to those appointments, but there is only a limited supply. But so we think, and nobody would take so much work to, if it wasn't of a financial profit. But the real number, we don't know. Our guys in the research lab are not able to tell you that, not exactly. Any more, or is it okay? Okay, the poker cheater. It's a malware that's taking advantage of the opponents in the poker. How many of you are playing poker? Hands up. And how many of you are playing it online? Okay, so I'm not really sure if you know all the web pages, but the most used and most popular are Poker Stars and Full Tilt Poker, and the attackers know this. So they were targeting players exactly in those games. Why? Because it's a lot of users, a lot of money in it, a lot of players, a lot of chances to get unnoticed with all those things that they were doing. How the spyware was actually working: it infected the computer of the player. Then it joined the table. It could find out which table he was playing on. So it joined the table. It took a screenshot of his screen, and the attacker could see what you had in your hand. So if you wanted to play all in and you were bluffing, he knew right away. So you would not win. You had no chance. How this was working, how the computers could be infected. There were 3 ways they were using. The first one is actually detected by our system as a PUA, so potentially unwanted application, install core. Then they were using toolbars, and really popular torrent client uTorrent. And then the third one, those are like supportive softwares. If you play poker online, I don't know if anybody of you use those, because if you're a really experienced player, you need to know the game of your opponent. So if you can see the statistics, like how many times he got all in, how many times he lost, how many times he won, it can help you to decide better. It can help you to know how he's going to act, what is his strategy, and to play against him. But if you get those from wrong sites or get the infected pieces, you got also the Odlanor, that's the name of the poker cheater. Our systems are giving it. So the first version, as I told you, it joined the table that you were playing on. How did it do this? From the screenshot in the URL, you can see the ID of the table. So it was able to find you in all those thousands of tables that are being played at any time. So it could be really misused. Then it took the screenshot, and he saw what you had in your hands. The trouble is, what our researchers didn't find out, and what we still don't know, that if this was used in some kind of automated way, or if it was something that was just used by the attacker manually. So he was playing on the table, and he was just looking at some other screen and seeing your hand. We don't know that. An updated version of Odlanor was using also another trick, and was not aiming only at your poker hand, but it was also aiming at your passwords that you saved in your browser. So it was bundled with a Nearsoft web browser passview, which is a legitimate application for you. If you want to get your passwords out of the browser, you can use this to decrypt them, because if you look in the browser, you only see the stars, so you don't know what's behind. This can be legitimately used for that, but it used it and misused it to steal all your passwords, and it was bundled with all the screenshots from your game, and it was sent to the attacker. This is how the files were looking that the attacker was getting. It was giving him some information on your machine, on the data size he was getting, but the most important, it was getting the window title. So he knew which table you were playing on, and he got the screenshots and passwords sent to him. Okay, the third piece that I'm going to present you and show you that what our guys have come across in the past is Android's attacked by the ransomware. I know in Lithuania many people have problem with CryptoLocker. This is CryptoLocker was targeting mostly PCs, laptops, usual devices that are used. But this ransomware is attacking the device you have in your pocket. The first one that was really interesting, this was the first ransomware for Android that was encrypting the files you had in your device. So if it was photos, videos, phone numbers, anything, everything was encrypted, you couldn't use it. The thing is, the first time we encountered it, it was pretty simple and it was using only a simple technique. So that's why it got the name SimPlocker. Why? Because it had in it the decryption key. So if you got infected by it, our guys were able to take out the decryption key, give it to you, and you were able to decrypt all the encrypted files you had in your Android. So it was pretty easy to defeat it. As you can imagine, it was demanding some ransom from you. So if you don't pay the money, you will not get your files back. That was in the beginning. How it was infecting the Android phones, there were two main ways. The first ones were popular games like Grand Theft Auto, and then it was taking advantage of adult video applications. All of them downloaded from the third-party markets, so this wasn't really out there if you were downloading stuff from, let's say, Google Play or anything else. This was in the third-party markets. As I said, in the beginning it was simple, but in that was 2014. Now, a year later, our guys have seen over 50 variants of this ransomware, and it got pretty nasty. In the beginning, it was targeting the Eastern Europe, and it was using different alphabet. The ransom was lower. In 2015, it changed the audience, or not the audience, the victims, to, let's say, Americans, Western countries and such, and using local police or, let's say, NSA even, to give it more credit and scare the hell out of you to get the money back. Also, the ransom amount grew according to this. So it was from $15 in the beginning when it was really simple and it was only a proof of concept that this is going to work, to the updated versions which are trying to get the $500 ransom. That is quite different if you get that from all those victims that were infected. It got also better self-defense. Sorry.
In what currency did they ask to pay? Was it Bitcoin or just wire transfer?
In the beginning, it was, I think it was in hryvnias, in Ukrainian currency. Later on, it came.
Bank transfer, right?
Sorry?
They usually use MoneyPack or something that is providing you some sort of, that is untraceable. So usually services like MoneyPack.
It got also a better self-defense. It got the admin rights for your device, so it was harder to remove it from the phone than before. Before you could go to safe mode and just delete the application. Later on, it got difficult. What was also nasty, what it did, it also encrypted zips, RARs, 7Zs, which doesn't sound that bad, but you have to come to the point that all those files are mostly used when you are having a backup. So if you backed up your Android and you had it somewhere on the SD card or whatever, it got encrypted too. So it was harder. If you had a backup for the case that you were infected by ransomware, it didn't help you anymore. And the last thing, as I said, the first version had the decryption key in it. Later, they got better, so it wasn't anymore in the ransomware. It was remotely installed, so it was harder to decrypt it. The second ransomware that was attacking the Android devices was the LockerPin-A. It came up this year, and it is the first ransomware that is setting the PIN for your mobile phone. The trouble with this is it sets a 4-digit PIN, which is random. So you can see that here. And it's not sent anywhere. So only the device knows the PIN number, not the attacker, not you, not anybody. So it's really hard to, like, you cannot guess it. It's too many chances and you have no chance to get there. It also had its self-defense right from the start. And it was trying to kill the AV process, keep the AVs, the most used, even ESET is under them. And also it was trying to stop the Android settings. This is, if you want to uninstall it the right way, the usual way, like in the Android device, this is what you are going to use. It didn't work for locker pin A. The third thing it was doing, it was getting the admin privileges. The trouble was, if you wanted to uninstall it, it was using such a screen. It's masquerading as a Google thing, so you would be thinking like, okay, this is an update for my phone, so it should be okay. But it said the operation is forbidden, so you couldn't get rid of the locker pin A. Also, again, the victims have changed. USA or the Americans are a better target because they have more money and they can give you more ransom. So 77% of those infections took part in USA. Okay, thank you very much. That was my part of the presentation. I'm going to give the word back to Peter.
Okay. 1, 2. No, 3, 4. Is it working? Okay, cool. Okay, so let's move from all of these, mainly the pocket cheater and the Android PCs were targeting masses, so they were trying to infect as many victims as possible. Now we are going to an operation that was working in an opposite manner. So the attackers were trying to infect and to attack very narrow group of victims. So this is what we call a targeted attack. This happened earlier this year. We were monitoring the operation throughout the April, mostly. And most of the victims were located in Russian-speaking countries. 90% of them, or slightly more than 90%, were located in were businesses located in Russia. And these guys were doing it in a, quite typical social engineering way. So they were crafting very precisely written email messages, and these were sent to a very specific persons within those businesses. Especially in these cases, we are talking about the accountant department. So typically, the accountant or the employee in the department would receive email message with a decoy document in it. The decoy document would look genuinely. It would mimic either an invoice or here we have another example. This is a contract with one of the largest Russian mobile operators, Megaphone. So not to be sending anything that would be looking weird and may raise suspicion. They were just really choosing the documents carefully, not to scare out the victims into further actions. And if the document was open, it would start a downloader that would, at the very beginning, scan the system to find out whether it is even worth infecting it and whether it is worth continuing in the process. So it would have a look, and if the user was searching or visiting any of these URLs, so there are mainly some online banking systems and stuff like that, it would then go and scan through processes, again at this computer, whether it uses, again, banking clients or even smart card client. So smart card readers, because one of the capabilities of this malware was enumerating smart cards. And if this got through, so if the malware decided, okay, this is worth infecting, only then it would download the main component, the main body of the threat itself. And this would look like a 7Z self-extracting executable. consisting of 4 different modules. I don't want to go into too much detail with this, but what is interesting about all of these modules is that they were not bothering with, writing the code from scratch. They simply took some legitimate applications and modify it a little bit to use it in their way. So for example, this MIMI module is Mimikatz, which is basically an open source recovery tool. So you can, this system preparation was used to get the passwords for the accounts, also preparing further actions, such as allowing remote desktop connections and stuff like that. This impact module, this is the name of the binary, was basically a light manager that is, again, legitimate software that is used for remote connection to the computers, and you can remotely control the actions through of this. And the spying, what we call a spying module, and the binary was named Punto by a company named Yandex, was using this one. And this software is used to automatically switch between Latin and Cyrillic alphabet. So if you are, for example, writing some text in Russian, then switch to English and stuff like that, it automatically detects what you are trying to write and switches accordingly. So the bad guys took the core of this and modified it so it would work as a keylogger. So basically, it would log every keystroke on the keyboard. So anything you would type, it would log and send to the attackers, to the remote server. What was another annoying thing from the technical perspective was, and what made analysis a bit harder, was that many of the samples that we've seen were actually digitally signed with a valid certificate. Now, apparently these certificates were stolen, and we contacted the authorities and made sure that all the certificate used were then revoked. But I don't want to say it's uncommon, but it's not that common with this type of malware. So after the infection was run, the attacker would have full control over the system, and you can only guess what secrets they were able to exfiltrate and what processes they were able to run through the system. So that was the first operation that was targeting primarily Russia. The other, somewhat similar in the targeted manner, was an operation that we dubbed Agents in the House. In this case, the agents are represented by 3 pieces of malware that we detect under this name, the agent dot and some 3-letter code. And the house in here represents an institution that owns a governmental, the .gov domain. So it's a governmental institution. Let's have a look how this usually happens, or in this specific case, how we came across this. So earlier this summer, we were testing our new detection techniques. We do this randomly. And as a result of the new detections, we end up with a bulk of files that we went through. And the first analysis suggested, that was quite surprising, that we've seen all the variants of this threat as early as in 2003. So you can see there had been more than 10 years of development of this threat. Sure, the first variants were not that sophisticated and not targeting the same institution as these, but still it's interesting that they stuck to it for that long time. The current variants that we found, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the agenda, were targeting, and some of them are still actually actively trying to target very high profile, as I said, governmental institution in Ukraine, Slovakia, and in Poland. And our system reported tens of the detections throughout the last, let's say, 2 months, roughly, from these institutions. So we know where these agents were operating, and let's have a look what they were capable of doing. So the malware consists of multiple components. Actually, it's 4 of them. So the first is a downloader, then a file stealer. This is the most interesting or more important part. Then it implements a backdoor and also a proxy. So the downloader, well, as the name suggests, the downloader usually downloads something, right? So except for sending a basic information at the very beginning about the OS version, accounts, and stuff like that, main purpose is to download the other components. That's not that interesting, right? But the interesting part is that how it is doing. It's using a somewhat strange technique. Let's say it's similar to steganography, so it's trying to hide within GIF files. So it's sending these files, basically the data or the communication strings that it needs to send. It encrypts and adds the GIF header in front of it and sends it via HTTP protocol. This is kind of interesting and has the potential to avoid some network scanning security solutions, because basically what you are looking at is HTTP traffic with some GIF file, so you can just guess that okay, someone is downloading some pictures. The next component, the file stealer, again, as the name suggests, was implemented to or designed to steal files. What is interesting is that the files that is supposed to download, the list of the files can be configured dynamically, and the configuration file can be sent from the command and control server. It has some filtering capabilities. It can, filter what type of files the attackers are interested in. If it has the bulk of the files that it's supposed to send back to the attacker, it encrypts it using RC cipher, RC4 specifically. And to send the key for the RC4, it uses RSA key, and it's interesting that if the length of key is of 1024 bits, it's not usable, it's not applicable for whatever the reason might be. It can go back and use the short one. And also it can execute commands, but it's more of a side product of it. Backdoor, typical backdoor, so grants the full access within the profile that it used for the infection. Interesting part is how it communicates back with the CNC server. There are three ways. First, it tries or it implements its own email client, so it's trying to send the email communication. If this is not possible because of the restrictions, the security measures that are within that network, it also tries to speak GIF, so using the same technique as the previous module, so basically encrypting the stuff that it needs to send and embedding it within a GIF file. And if these two fail, it even tries to misuse the Outlook that is installed on the system, if there is any, of course. This is done in a very clever way. It tries to sneak an innocently looking message into Outlook's outgoing folder. And the message basically looks like this, that the code that it needs to send is placed outside the HTML header. So it's an HTML message that if you would open it, would be blank. So must not necessarily raise any suspicion. So as much as I'd like to tell you more about this, unfortunately we can't, because the investigation is still in progress, and because of the nature of the targets, the high-profile stuff, that we cannot share that much information as we would like to. But the current actions basically are that we are cooperating with the institution and in mitigating and to basically report what's been done and getting as much information as possible. Okay, and this brings us to the last part of our presentation, which is dubbed router worm, and I will tell you something more about a very strange worm that was targeting a Linux embedded system within mainly home routers in order to perform social network media fraud. Basically, it was all about clickjacking, so granting or winning some extra likes across social networks, basically to earn on the advertisement. And this is a nice case because a lot of people ask me, how do we come up with the detection names? For example, this one we dubbed Linux Moose. And basically, there are many ways how we can do this. It's quite random, I would say, but there is one that is quite often, and is a case where we find a string within the code itself. So we find something that is significant for that binary, and that is something that it shouldn't be there. In this case, it was a string elan, and why is not called Linux elan but Linux Moose? Well, this is simple because the analysis and the research was done by our Canadian team, and since they are placed in Quebec and their first language is French, then elan in French is or stands for moose. So that's why Linux Moose. So that's the whole mystery of our strange naming techniques. Despite the attackers might not necessarily had the moose in mind, then they might have been also referring to Lotus Elan, for example. We can speculate. And since we are a Slovak company, we like to think that they might be referring to Elan, which is a Slovak rock band. Well, maybe not. So that much to the name, and let's go to the important stuff. What was the network capabilities of the worm? So it was able to pivot through firewalls. There was a homemade NAT also implemented, so it was capable of traversing through NAT. It also implements a custom-made proxy service. Of course, this proxy service was available only to a whitelisted IP addresses, basically the IP addresses belonging to the attackers. It also implemented a remotely configurable generic network sniffer, and it was also capable of DNS hijacking. So despite the fact that the most reason and the most target they were after were the social networks, it also had these additional capabilities. Now, when we start to untangle the whole operation, it got quite complicated because of its scope and the multi-threading that was used by the thread itself. So we're trying to put some explanatory infographics in place. So basically, from this slide in here, you can see how and what were the actions of an infected router. So basically, it allowed the operator to steal browser cookies from the victims and then use those to perform social network fraud. And what makes the worm was the self-replicating capabilities. So it had dedicated quite some power, computational power, to spreading itself to another devices. And as I said at the very beginning, that the primary target were home routers. Yes, that is true, but as a collateral damage, we've seen cases where also other Linux embedded devices got infected with this, such as IP cameras and even some medical devices. There was one case of that as well. So, as I said, what makes the worm the worm? So, from the definition, worm is a piece of malware that is capable of self-replication, so that is capable of spreading itself to another devices. So here you can see how many ways it was trying to escape from the router to another. So it was scanning internet, it was scanning also the LAN, LAN interfaces. It was also checking its presence within the infected network using a beacon. So basically it was listening whether there are any other infected devices in its reach. What was interesting also technically that it was capable to replicate itself across different architectures, so some MISP or ARM architectures. And also, what is important is that the command and control server was made aware of new compromises. So basically, the CNC server was active throughout the replication process. So when the router was infecting a new device, it was reporting back to the CNC server. The compromise protocol was quite simple, straightforward. So the CNC server was sending some obfuscated command to the already infected device. which device should it go after, and which command should be executed at the victim site. And then the communication went back, reporting, you know, what's the information collected from the victim's device. Here, this is the let's say the high level view of all the actions that the router was doing. And as you can see, and as I already said, that many of those threads from the multi-threading that it used were dedicated to the self-replication part. So if we go one round as the typical actions of the router, that most of them were dedicating to the propagation through various interfaces. So let's have a look at the network sniffer. As I mentioned, this was primarily after HTTP cookies. So here you can see some samples which cookies they were after. So mainly these social networks. This graph shows the activity of the proxy that was implemented compared to the other activity that was dedicated to controlling the infected device. So the usage of the implemented proxy was quite heavy. That again goes hand in hand with the social fraud activities. Here is a breakdown of the social networks they were after. So it was mainly Instagram and Twitter. Here, the tiny part is then split into the rest. So mainly Instagram and Twitter, or Wine, they were after. And an example, what was the result of the actions? There was actually some randomly chosen accounts in these social networks. For example, here this Cine, this looks insignificant. Were gaining followers, which then can be sold as through the advertisement channels, right? So when you are offering to an advertisement channel that, okay, I have a profile that had that many followers, that increases the price of the account. So in this example, you can see how one insignificant, let's say, account managed to triple or quadruple the number of followers with almost no posts within few weeks. What was also interesting that they were aware of some internal security measures that the social networks are implementing. So they were not increasing the follower number too fast. So they were aware of some limits they should be not crossing. And they were gaining very slowly, but constantly. What's fair to be told as well is that it was not implemented in a sophisticated manner as it could have been. So it seems that the attackers were testing the scenarios mainly. So there is no persistence mechanism and no shell access for operators. So basically, this means that they cannot fiddle with the infected devices in real time, and no persistence mechanism means that if you have an infected router back home, the only thing you needed to do was to reboot it. So it was not going to stay there. But then again, you needed to be aware that if they manage to infect the router once, they can reinfect. So we released a white paper, including all the analysis data and all the important information, and also the indicators of compromise and some suggestions how to clean the devices. And after a few weeks after the publication, the command and control servers went dark. So as I said, after reboot, all the devices should be clean and there should be no infection remaining in them. But as I said, the operators, when they manage to compromise the devices once, they can always reinfect. So that's why we started to develop some additional tool that would help to mitigate such threats. So for example, we have implemented DNS hijacking detection. So in cases the DNS service of your router gets hijacked, and which means that you can be redirected to pretty much any website out there, we can detect that. We also started to work on a router checking tool. It's we are developing it as a proof of concept, and it's freely available on GitHub as an open source. And as I said, after detection, the CNC server went down, and we've been constantly monitoring. As you see, the monitors are still in place. So we really saw, and we are still seeing the drop in the activity, and we are on a constant lookout for newer version of the Linux mouse infection. So since then, we haven't seen anything that would use the same techniques. We detected some similar pieces of malware, but so far as I know, there is no version of Linux Linux mouse out there. So that much from ESET research, and by this I thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, let us ask us, and we'll.
I have a couple questions about the Android loggers, or actually any mobile platform loggers. So do they spread in the network as a crypto logger does to other mobile devices?
Well, usually the infection vectors, as said by Ondrej already, is through third-party stores. So basically, the ones that are unofficial. I don't want to name that the only official is Google Play. There are some others, such as Amazon and stuff like that. But usually, how they do it, they take a popular game, they create some fake version, modify it slightly, put it on some unofficial store out there, and start a campaign that would link the users to the source to make them download it. That
if one device is encrypted, so does this malware just spread to the other device?
no, if it's like hopping from one device to the other, we haven't seen that yet. So we haven't seen any ransomware that would act as a worm as well. We haven't seen that.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that they are using the game. Sorry, this is not working really right. What they were trying to do was using the popularity of the games, but they were giving the cracks, so it was for free on the third-party markets. That's why they were downloading it.
Yes, technically that would be feasible. Yes, no problem. But for a common user, it's like no way how to do it. And as mentioned in the presentation, it had some basic self-defense techniques. So installing itself under the administrator's accounts, which renders it very difficult for a common user to even uninstall and to get the access through the debug mode to the device. So yeah, it is technically feasible, but for a common user, it's. Just reboot it. Well, and to set a yeah, the main way how the spread was infecting was through weak credentials. There was no sophisticated, exploit behind it. They were just brute forcing the weak passwords. So to reboot, ideally, because despite the fact that if you reboot, the thread is no longer there, no one says that within the time it was compromised, the attackers might have planted some additional malware to that. So ideal case is to bring it back to, or install a clean software on it, and to set up a proper password. That would be enough, and that worked, as we said. No, if you apply the same configuration, then No, we don't, as far as I know. You know, all these numbers, when it comes to the number of variants that different antivirus vendors claim that they are detecting, is very proprietary, because we use different categorizations than the other company does. So it doesn't really have any, you know, real value in the number. The truth is that what we are seeing, the 100% trend these days is using what we detect as cryptics, basically encryption envelopes over the same malware. So basically the malware stays and remains the same, and it's for very good purposes, because it would be way too expensive for the attackers to come up with a new, you know, to invest in new development of a new threat. It's much cheaper just to encrypt it with a new envelope and try to evade detection in that way. So the numbers don't have really that much value in them.
There are several tools created, for example, by Kaspersky Lab, noransom.kaspersky.com, which decrypts some of files encrypted by ransomware viruses. Is it true? Well, my opinion that this affects only a very small portion of encrypted files, and the general answer to the victim is that no, unfortunately, if you don't
Yes.
back up your files are lost.
Correct. It, as shown in the presentation, for example, a year ago with the simpler locker, mainly because the implementation was done in a, you know, lousy way, we were able to dig out the encryption keys. But unfortunately, crypto lockers, crypto vault, and other stuff that is out there today is programmed pretty well. And if the crypto is implemented in a correct way, the keys are sent to a remote server. There is no way for you or for anyone else, for that matter, to break the encryption, because they are using simply the same standards as, for example, internet banking is. So, bad luck. In this case, definitely the only solution. We don't advise our users to pay. We advise them to use backups. That's the only effective and quite cheap solution, to be honest, because if this got infected with CryptoLocker and I had all the data backed up somewhere else, then it's just, you know, I lose some hours, some time with it just to replace and to recover from the backup, but that's it.